February didn't get much better, and then March got a bit worse. And then by the time we got to the summer, things were really tanking. We went from a fast-growing, profitable business to one that was losing money and actually running out of cash. And it was just like, we're going to have to close all the international offices, fire a load of people, step back from our ambition of being Europe's favourite little juice company. And we just sort of looked at each other and were just like, oh, God, that's so depressing. The rumours were starting to fly around the business. It was like some people were like, oh, there's no problem at all. We're absolutely fine. Other people's like, we're going bust tomorrow. So we had to share very clearly what was happening with it, what the numbers were, what this meant. And by being transparent, it meant that really killed the rumours and basically let people sort of focus on the day job. Great.
Good to jump in.
Good to go.
Adam, thank you so much for doing this. Incredibly grateful.
Pleasure.
As I said, it's been I think everyone who listens to this podcast has held Innocent up, and rightly so, in this huge inspiration, huge, you guys paved the path, and which so many have followed. I've had so many people come on this podcast, Giles Brooke, Emma Heal, there's a whole like Innocent kind of institution, and I think people venerate and talk about how amazing Innocent's been. So I'm really excited to get into that today. So thank you for doing this. We're incredibly grateful.
Pleasure. No, it's pleasure to be here. And I think that's one of the things we did best at Innocent was actually hiring some amazing people, and they've gone on to do some incredible things. Giles, Emma, and many others besides. I think that's one of the legacies I feel most proud of. We're
definitely going to get onto that. I think what I'd like to start with is I was doing like a jumble of research online, and I found a book on the Jam Jar Instagram, which was The Black Swan.
Oh yeah,
by Nassim Taleb. And I want to kind of use that as our kind of opening gambit.
Sure.
And he's got two books. He's got Black Swan and Anti-Fragile. So Anti-Fragile is, the whole premise of that book is things gained from disorder. So it's like post-traumatic growth versus post-traumatic stress.
Yeah.
And I think I always saw the Innocent journey as this kind of boom going upwards, that you kind of built the rocket ship. It was soaring upwards. And I'd love to kind of parachute into 2007, 2008, and kind of the Black Swan event, or the Black Swan was the financial crash.
Yeah.
It was almost like a monstrous beast that was kind of attacking Fruit Towers, if you want to put it in those terms. And I'd love to go into what was as you say, you've built this rocket ship, it begins to tank. What was the hardest day in that period? What were the sleepless nights? What were the feelings?
Yeah. I think probably, so just to set the context, the business has grown, from nothing to about 100 mil in 9 years. Sort of broadly, everything had been going right. Tailwinds had been with us. The trends were with us. The economy was good. And I think we wrote the budget for 2008, which was to do, I think, 140 million of turnover, which would 30% growth and make, I can't remember what it was, but 10, 15 million bottom line, expand across Europe. Everything was going well, and we wrote this thing. And the first signs that things were going wrong was beginning of 2008, January. We normally have a big January. The big January wasn't quite as big as it normally was, as we expected. And then things started to, February didn't get much better, and then March got a bit worse. And then by the time we got to the summer, things were really tanking, and we were actually losing sales, losing money, and we went from a fast-growing, profitable business to one that was losing money and actually running out of cash. And I remember all of us sat around and said, okay, so we need a new plan here. And the thing that we'd said was, we're not going to take any external money. We will do this independently, and let's write the plan that gets us through. And we wrote that plan, and it was the most depressing plan you've ever seen. I remember sitting in the room where we sort of shared it, and it was just like, we're going to have to close all the international offices, fire a load of people, step back from our ambition of being Europe's favourite little juice company. And we just sort of looked at each other and were just like, oh God, that's so depressing. That's just not what we're about. So we thought, well, look, the constraint here was about raising money. So if we raise that, loosen that constraint and say we will raise money, what could the plan look like? And from that low point, actually things started to get better. Not directly, but that decision was a really good one. It was like, you know what, let's raise some money and let's continue on our mission to be Europe's favourite juice company. And whilst we did have to trim and cut back, it wasn't the wholesale, complete about turn that we would have had to do if we were unfunded. And so that was probably the most depressing day when we looked at that plan and just went, oh God.
What was on the plan specifically? Because I think this could help. We're going through, so many people say to me is that this is one of the hardest times right now. Where I suppose I'm trying to get from is Black Swan to building anti-fragile brands for today. Like, what was on that plan back then, and what do you think people should be putting on their plans to survive kind of this tumultuous time?
I suppose, but just pulling back a bit, I think what happened in 2008 was sort of everything that could go wrong went wrong at the same time. And I think that's sometimes life is like that, actually, and Black Swan events actually are a bit more frequent than you sort of realise, because there was that, and then obviously the pandemic, and so actually that's, thinking forward, it's realising actually when things go wrong, often they go wrong in 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, and that's exactly what happened for us in 08. So obviously the recession hit, people stopped spending on what they saw as needless luxuries, and Innocent for some people was seen as that. Tropicana launched a smoothie and started getting really aggressive on price. Sterling collapsed because of the recession, and all our input prices are in euros, so our input prices went up. The mango crop, the apple crop, the banana crop were all bad. Normally they balanced each other out. One was good, one was bad. That year, for some reason, they were all bad. So we were hit by this sort of massive, like, bang, 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 bang. And we just started on a big international expansion, which meant we had put in loads of cost into the business, opening up offices and hiring people abroad. And so suddenly it went from being massively profitable to losing money really quickly. It was, in the space of 3 or 4 months. So that was the context. And I suppose to answer your question on the plan that we didn't follow was basically a slash and burn, cut everything right back. Basically close all the offices outside of London. We would have had to let a load of people go, cut all MPD, all marketing, and it was just like, oh, that's too depressing. And we're fortunate. We hadn't diluted much. We hadn't raised a lot of money beforehand, so we had the capacity to raise money, which is what we went and did, and that allowed us to basically invest through the tough time, the recession, where many other people didn't, and that helped actually form the foundation of the next growth of the business.
And what would you say in that period of time, this, as you say, this stress period, and you guys have come out, post-traumatic growth is what you were saying.
Yeah.
How do you personally, like when you go back to home to Notting Hill, how do you deal with that pressure? Because I'm kind of asking this selfishly as well, because I feel a lot of pressure, and I think...
Look, I think actually it was always... From the setup of the business with 3 of us running it and 3 of us equal partners, that made sharing the burden so much easier, because you didn't have to carry it around in your own head. I'm in awe of people who set up businesses on their own, or even with just 2 of you, actually. 3 allows you to share the burden much, much more. And that was hugely useful. But then by the 2007-8, we actually had a great top team. So it was the whole board team. And we were just very transparent. So whilst we all felt it personally, we could at least sort of share the feelings between us. And I think that was hugely important. And one of the things we learned was not only share it with the top team, but actually share it with everybody in the business, because the rumours were starting to fly around the business. It was like some people were like, oh, there's no problem at all, we're absolutely fine. Other people's like, we're going bust tomorrow, and every attitude, every belief in between. So we had to share very clearly what was happening with it, what the numbers were, what this meant. And by being transparent, it meant that really killed the rumours and basically get people sort of focus on the day job.
Hey guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Honestly, means the absolute world to me. I'd be so grateful for a small favour, please. It is so hard growing a YouTube channel. It is so bloody hard. If you please enjoy these videos, just click the subscribe button. More subscribers equals bigger guests equals better conversations, and hopefully you can learn more as you build your food and drink brand. Thank you so much. And then you, with Jam Jar, you work and invest in so many amazing brands. I think Lucky Saint have been on this podcast. Who Gives a Crap have been on this podcast.
Yeah.
What would you say are the principles and like the absolute bare minimum requirements for brands to have, whether that's like, for brands to have to remain anti-fragile in today's climate?
Yeah, I think the brands have got to stand for something that consumers care about, and I suppose always deliver on that trust. And I think that's the sort of outward bit, but the inward bit is just as important. They've got to be built on a foundation and culture of people who share a common mission and give a damn about what they're doing and will work really hard for each other. And so it's the combination of the consumer sort of pull and that internal sort of belief that I think gets brands through. And that's certainly what got Innocent through the tough times.
Yeah, because I've heard you talk, and Libby talks about this better versus different proposition as kind of a common thread through most of the brands you invest in. I'd love to kind of tease that out, and then we can talk about this internal versus external.
Yeah.
So I think first, because there's a lot of people I've spoken to, it's like and I even did like a little talk about this, which is be different, not better.
Yeah.
And it's almost like everyone says they're better.
Yeah.
We're more prebiotic, we're more probiotic, more blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
Be different, and you kind of create a category of one, right?
Yeah.
But what you've said is the be different and better.
Yeah,
So I think just setting the scene, like what is define different and then define better, please.
So in terms of different, you've got to stand out. You've got to actually find a way of not only not doing exactly what everyone else does, but communicating that as well. And for Innocent, it was really clear. It was like everyone was all about multicolours, really garish and bright branding. And with Innocent, we went completely pared back, very simple, and that was just different. It just looked different. And, different can be on the aesthetics like that. It can be in the taste. It can be on the tone and attitude. It can be on many different things. But I think being different and has to be across a number of different directions or parameters, basically. So I think being different is important to sort of be different across the board, across everything that matters to consumers, be it the design, the look of the feel, the taste, the tone, and what you stand for. And I think that's what we managed to do well at Innocent. We were really quite distinctive versus all the other drinks competition. And then being better, well, for us actually, it was we tasted a lot better than what was out there. And that's subjective, obviously, but actually that's what people fundamentally care about in a food product. And all the stuff around the way we talk, the pictures we drew, the silly jokes, that was all secondary to the fact the products were great. And obviously, better didn't mean everybody found them delicious, but on average, people would definitely prefer ours to pretty much anything else out there. And we spent all our efforts on doing that, and then the funny little sort of marketing bits were the add-ons. So it was absolute focus on the product. That was the heart of all the marketing that we ever did.
So almost the better is the product angle, and the difference, the culture, and the branding.
Yeah, obviously, yes, exactly. So if you're better, you are different to some extent, but you need more than just being sort of tasting better. If we were just tasted better but had exactly the same packaging, exactly the same look, tone and feel as everyone else, I don't think the business would have worked. You kind of need to do both at the same time.
What would you say is more important, different or better?
I think you've got to do both.
I
think you've got to do both. I think that's the point. You've got to do both.
Interesting.
Because you otherwise just don't, if you're better but the same, no one notices you. It's you grow very slowly, if at all. If you're different but not better, you get noticed and no one then uses you, comes back again. So you kind of need both. And that's the thing with business. Business is hard, right? Starting a business is hard. You need to get everything lined up. You can get 9 out of 10 things right. And if that 10th thing is a key thing, business may not work. So that's why it's a rare thing for businesses to work. And anyone who's doing it it's a bloody hard work and a challenge, right? But the rewards are great when you get it right.
I want to go into this. I think I talked about with you this on the call, mate, which was this 5 whys framework, and I find it really interesting. Is we're kind of combining the be different and better with the five whys. Basically, 5 whys allows you to get deeper and deeper and deeper into like the root cause of things. And I almost think people listen to this. You've got level 1 brands, which would be something at like a the food market in Barnes. Yeah, that's level 1. Level 2 would be a Whole Foods, Planet Organic. Level 3 would be someone like in a Sainsbury's. Or a co-op store. Level 4, blah, blah. Level 5 would be an Innocent, a Tony's, a Vita Coco, fill in the Urban Legend, fill in the blank. I'd love to know, and Giles, I asked Giles this question, and I was like, what how did you find that extra gear? To almost go down into that, and you've seen work with so many brands. How do you go from like a level 3, which would probably be that 4 million mark, 4 to 5 million mark where people get stuck? What's the extra things you've got to do to kick on, to build an Innocent, to build a Vita Coco?
I think there's an obsessiveness that you need to really want to improve everything all the time. And I think that obsessiveness was definitely there at Innocent, be it make the packaging slightly more eco, make the packaging slightly funnier, make it slightly cheaper, make it slightly more appealing. Same with the product, same with the deals we do with our distributors. The constant, John always talks about Kaizen, the Japanese continual self-improvement on manufacturing. And that was definitely a sort of a culture that we imbued throughout Innocent, which is not being happy with the status quo, always restlessly trying to improve things. And that's difficult because, you've got pulled in constant different directions as a business, but actually you just can't stand still. You can't say, I've got a product, right, I'm going to go out and sell it now. It's like that product will get caught up, other people do it, and it won't be different or better if you don't move forward in 6 months. So I think that's one of the things we did really well, actually, is constantly, restlessly wanted to make things better.
So that's almost like a kind of a top line, almost like a cultural thing, really. Like definitely. Relentless pursuit of better. Myriad of different ways to say it. And then I suppose, and again, this is all case by case. Yeah. But what would you say are some of the hires you need to go from, say, a 4 million level 3 brand to like we're going to start building into a real big household brand?
Yeah. I think one of the things that we realised early on was actually we hired a people person well before businesses of our size would normally hire a people person, because actually we realised that people was the heart of what the business was about. And that actually was a really important hire, so that often the people side sort of gets left behind, and you talk about the revenue, the gross margin, the profit, and we've got to make sure people are happy. And that was not the way we thought about it. It was like, if you've got a really highly functioning team with great people in that are stretched and motivated and well trained, that will then deliver the results. And so it was turning it the other way around, really putting the people side first. And I think that was one of the lasting legacies of the business.
And then, was there anything you did? I know.
And sorry, just to finish off on that, because you sort of asked about hires. I think at first we sort of hired generally sort of bright generalists to do the job, and that's kind of right, because we didn't really know what the jobs were, and you sort of needed to do that. But then there needed to be a change at some point where we needed to get some expertise in, and I was sort of running the commercial sales bit, and I'd never really done it. And I remember hiring the first key account manager who really knew her stuff in terms of supermarkets, and it was like, oh my gosh, right, that's how you do it. And it was like, oh, okay. Real expertise, that's going to improve our business. And so it was then blending proper deep expertise with sort of general smarts, and that made for a powerful combination. Not just saying hiring from outside, not just hiring internally, but actually blending the two, and made the business really work.
And we've talked a lot about and we're going to get onto the Alumni almost. How specifically in the interview process, like what were you doing to sort of, what were you specifically, not necessarily you, but what were you specifically asking to be like, this is the right person, both in terms of like attitude and aptitude? Because I think you said something which I thought was amazing, which was I'd rather have a hole than an arsehole, right? I think that's just...
I think we can nick that from Apple or something.
But still, like we'll explore that. But what were you doing in the interview process to like make sure you weren't getting arseholes in?
Yeah. So I think early on, we codified what the values of Innocent were, and sort of everyone does this now, and it's not that groundbreaking. But I think at the time it was relatively uncommon, and we put those values up on the backs of the toilet doors and at the start of every presentation, and in the induction, and up in the kitchen above the toaster. And so it was inculcated into the business. And the first interview with anyone was around those values, and it was always making sure that someone was on values before worrying about the skill levels that they had and whether they could do the job. And that was really important to making sure tonally and culturally the people that brought in fitted and weren't arseholes, and were quite the opposite, were people who added to the great genetic mix of Innocent. And I think that was probably the most important thing to do. And then, of course, you need to check that someone can do the job. So you've got to know what the job is, and that was a bit of discipline about writing it down and saying, okay, these are the responsibilities, and then testing people, doing case studies, and not being a bit lazy in the interview of just sort of, I get on with them, let's hire them. It was actually, let's check they can do the job they say they can do. And that takes time and effort. If you're hiring for a salesperson, giving them a load of data, or maybe in a situation that you're trying to sell with into a customer with, and giving them enough to get their teeth stuck into so that they can actually show what they can do with the information and the sell that you've given them. That takes them a lot of energy and takes you a lot of energy to put it together, but it means you start hiring really great people.
Because I know what you said, as you say, it's kind of like commonplace now. A lot of times your brands codify the values, put it on the wall. One thing that kind of fascinates me, and I've seen it happen, and I've interviewed people, they've said this, is like you put the values on the wall, but it doesn't necessarily translate to the actual behaviours day to day. From, again, everyone venerates their time at Innocent. They genuinely said like this. The culture is what you say outside and inside. It like they link together. Because I think sometimes what you can see on a company website or on a toilet wall is like, well, hang on, mate, this doesn't line up. We
used to talk about the sticker rock test. So like a sticker rock just has that words all the way through, and it's consistent. And so wherever you cut it, sticker rock, like literally the old candy that you get. It's kind of had the words written in, like I love Blackpool or something like that. And it said I love Blackpool consistently all the way through wherever you cut it, and that was exactly the sort of thinking. It's like wherever you cut Innocent, you should feel and touch the same culture. So wherever you interact with us, whether it's be a supermarket buyer or a consumer at shelf, or someone cleaning out the bins, and it basically feels Innocent all the way through.
So maybe how would you do that? Like, how would you treat the cleaner in the office? Not you specifically, but like that. I think that could be an interesting lens to explore this.
I mean, I think you're really clear on the values, and then the bit I suppose I didn't say, and you alluded to, is on behaviours. It's like, okay, so what does that mean? If you're living up to the values, these are the sorts of ways you behave, and so making it actually sort of obvious for people what the values mean in behaviour terms. And I think calling out people who've lived by the values. And there was a sort of, I can't remember what we called it at the time, but it was essentially Employee of the Month, and that was sort of voted on by other people who've gone above and beyond and really demonstrated the values. And so every month we'd call that out, and it was a bit of fun. Someone got £100 to go and eat in a restaurant or something, and it was just. With anything, you've just got to keep communicating the same thing, and then it gets through. And we were really consistent on that, on the values. The values we wrote 4 years into the business, 3 or 4 years in, were the values that are still up on the toilet doors now. So they haven't changed. The behaviours underpinning them haven't changed, and I think everyone knew what was expected of them. And I think that's really important.
How do you spot like an arsehole when people are like wearing masks? Like, it's part of life's dance is people wear masks. And I think I'm obviously don't have to go into specifics about like a arsehole, but it's you've worked with so many businesses, you must kind of understand, like, how do you spot that? I mean,
I suppose you get it. You've got to have a proper conversation. You've got to be looking for the inconsistencies. And of course, you're going to get it wrong sometimes. And the trick is, once you realise you've got it wrong and you've hired the wrong person, you've got to get them out of the business really quite quickly. And no one ever, if you find there isn't a fit, there's always a sort of like, I'll just give it a couple more months because it's a bit tough to go, it's a bit awkward conversation and I don't really want to start a whole hiring process again. And you can make up all these excuses to yourself. And I've done it many times of like, oh no, I won't do it now. And it's always the wrong decision. And it's all for you and for the individual, because if they don't fit, they don't fit. And you're doing no one any favors by keeping them in the business. So actually being honest to yourself, your values and what the business stands for by actually having the awkward conversation saying it's not working out, let's go our separate ways as quickly as possible is something I learned over time, got better at over time, but is really important. Otherwise you just store up problems.
And is there any advice you give for people who are going through that problem now? They've brought in the sales director, or they've brought in the finance director, they know it's not working, that it's just bubbling away in them. Like, what's the art
of the conversation as quickly as possible? Be honest, be transparent, be generous in terms of severance, all those sorts of things, but don't find excuses for keeping people that don't fit in the business. And
then when you say you'd rather have a whole, how do you survive? Or not survive? Yeah. How do you, from the leadership perspective, like bring people together when there's that hole in and keep trudging forward? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I think that's where once again you go back to the values of one of the values was generosity, and then being generous with your time. So everyone's got to give a bit more time to help fill in the hole until we find someone. And as and I think that's you're pulling for each other. You're helping each other out because there's a gap and there's work that needs doing. So I think it sort of goes back to the values. Again, and there's also leading by example. If you're asking more of your team, but you're scooching out the office at 4 o'clock all the time, it's kind of like that's going to at some point come unstuck, right? And we worked our nuts off at Innocent, and so and people saw that, so that sets the tone.
Yeah, that's exactly what Giles said. So one of the questions I asked him is, how do you going down that level 3 to level 6? He's like, the founder sets the pace of the brand, and I think I find that what you've said there.
But we made a decision between us that we were saying, look, we're going to work incredibly hard during the week, and we're going to basically take weekends off. We're really going to do our absolute utmost. Now, sometimes there are necessities; you basically had to do a bit of work at the weekends, but I think you've also you've got to be careful not to burn out, because actually it's not a sprint, right? Starting a business, it's going to be 10 years, it's going to be 15 years, before you get to a scale that's that makes it really interesting. And so the reality is you've got to find a pace of life and work that you can keep up. And working every weekend is not that. And so we took holidays, but we worked bloody hard, and we tried not to work weekends, and that made a big difference. Actually.
Yeah, I think there's different.
North Star: get listed, say listed, and grow. Do you actually know your shopper? If you don't know your shopper, you're literally pissing and spunking money up the wall. Knowing your shopper is the secret weapon to unlock more grocery listings and more stores. But not knowing your shopper is literally like driving in the dark, hungover, without a sat-nav, in a thunderstorm, in February, with 5 miles of petrol in the tank. But knowing your shopper is like having a sat-nav. A full tank of petrol. It's a glorious sunny day. You're listening to the Sugar Babes, and you've got a fresh, hot pumpkin spice latte by your side. North Star Illuminator is the shopper map to the promised land of growth and success. It does 3 wonderful things for your brand. 1, make your marketing budget sweat. When you've got lucid, crystal clarity on exactly where each precious penny is going, you know how to drive loyalty with existing customers or even bring new shoppers into your brand. Numero 2, what's actually driving performance? Do you actually know why your sales are going up and down? You need to know, are you bringing new shoppers into the category? Is that driving growth? Are loyal customers buying more of your brand? Are shoppers switching in and out of your brand versus other brands? I mean, Perfect Head's a glorious example. They are bringing new shoppers into sports and energy. They are so incremental versus, say, chocolate bars, where people just switch in and out of brands all the time. The more you know this, the more oomph you've got with your buyer when you go to do a marketing plan, a joint business plan with retailers. The buyers want to know how incremental you are to the category. That is your passport to success. North Star is your passport. And what you can do is you can literally see it by channel, by retailer, get so specific. If you're looking to go to the next level, honestly, get in touch with North Star and go to the promised land. MKJ Ignite are a team of experienced recruiters who specialize in the challenger brand space. They recruit for over 50 brands ranging from pre-revenue startups right through to some award-winning brands such as Real Superfoods and Purdy and Fig. They recruit across all levels and all functions, so whether you're looking for a new salesperson, a new marketing whiz, or an ops guru, MKJ Ignite have got you covered. They're bloody good at what they do, trust me. So if you're looking to hire or you're looking for a new role, get in touch with MKJ Ignite. They won't let you down.
There's definitely this hustle kind of culture thing. I want to talk. I've found some like kind of random things that I like to link onto. I want to talk about like your ski trips with Heston Blumenthal. I find him, in terms of, I know we talked kind of before we recorded the food thing.
Yeah.
I think what he's done is just insane.
Yeah.
Like just as a human being for food.
Totally.
I interviewed Oisin Rogers, who's the founder of the Devonshire.
Okay, yeah.
And so obviously Ashley Palmer Walters, who was the head chef of the Fat Duck, is there.
Yeah.
And we were talking about his like suet pie that he made, and I've been to like the Heinz Head, and I think it's one of the most insane kind of restaurants, and just the way they've done it is amazing. But you talked, I think it was, I don't know the article, but you talked about these ski trips you had with him, and like these rabbit holes he takes you down.
Yeah.
What's one of the kind of craziest rabbit holes he's maybe taken you down, and what did you maybe learn down there? If you can remember.
I can't. I mean, to be honest, specifics I can't remember. But just he is the absolute sort of crazy genius inventor. You know, he is absolutely. He's sort of totally brilliant, but completely nuts, and I love it. And I think it comes across in his public persona because he gets really passionate about something and will just follow it. And I think the last thing I talked to him about was, you know, he was talking about the gut biome, like 10, 15 years ago, before, you know, people were really clocking onto it, and he was saying it's so important for mental well-being, all this, and, you know, he'd go off on this, what's he going on about? And lo and behold, he's completely right. You know, it's like everyone has caught up. He's well ahead of the curve on these things, and always has been, and was like that with his food. So it's great being around people like that, because you just sort of you're trying to catch up. You're just trying to understand really what it is they're saying, and often you don't realise until 5 years later. It's like, that's what he was talking about. I see. And
also, it's almost like his relentless obsession with improving everything.
Absolutely.
Is there anything else you think he may have, just by kind of osmosis and being privy to him hanging out, that you think has changed the way you view things? Or because some of the stuff I remember watching the programs as a kid when he's like going back in time and doing those. You know, like the feasts of the pie. I remember that program, and I was like, this is just. And I must have been 14 when I was watching that. Yeah. But yeah, like, is there anything else he's kind of like maybe changed the way you've seen things, or?
I mean, you know, Heston sort of. I think it's that sort of restless desire to just make things completely better and just improve them the whole time, and he just. You know, we said we did that at Innocent. Boy, he did that in spades with the Fat Duck and anything he touches, right? And so it was kind of inspirational to be around him and just go, okay, we need to stick with this. We're maybe never going to do it quite at the extent that he does, but you know what? It's worth doing, because only there do you start doing extraordinary things like he's achieved.
What would you say about, again, was there any like one or two improvements that at Innocent that you, when you kind of pushed on that door, kind of was... I don't know if you Perry Hayden Taylor did Big Fish. He's been on the podcast, and he talks about this slipstream thing. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you press on a lot of doors, like this continuous improvement, and nothing's really happening there. Boom, you open that door and it just goes. Was there anything like that?
Well, I think one of the big changes, for instance, we made at Innocent was, you know, when we first started, we never owned our own factories, and we were working with manufacturers to help us make smoothies, and they were buying all the fruit, and we would spec what we wanted, and they blended up, and you'd end up with, you know, a good product. But we sort of realised that actually the thing that really matters is the quality of the fruit, what we're putting in, and so if we really want to get great at this, we need to own that bit. So we built the whole fruit sourcing, the man from Del Monte sort of function, which is literally going out to the farmers, working out what it is we wanted, and buying stuff ourselves and then getting that delivered to the manufacturers. And that was like a huge undertaking because it was a whole new leg of the business that we'd never had before. It was quite, we were doing pretty well without it, and wasn't a pressing reason seemingly to do it. But if we wanted to make the very best smoothies, we needed to really understand the fruit much more deeply than we did by buying through other people. And by doing that, I think actually that completely changed the business, because actually you ended up with much better quality at lower prices, more consistently, with more knowledge of what was going on and ability to swap into different suppliers when problems happen. So it fundamentally transformed the supply chain of the business and then the products that people were drinking. And so that was difficult. That was a whole new thing to do, and none of us knew really anything about growing fruit or the way strawberries are pressed and bananas are peeled. All of that stuff we had to learn, and but it transformed the business.
Yeah, you said it was difficult, and one thing in the kind of prep I've done for this is I want to get, and you talked about at the beginning, but about between yourself, Richard, and John, there's three of us in the room.
Yeah.
But what I find fascinating is how I can't remember where you said it. It was on a podcast or on an article. You said same problem, three different angles. Mm-hmm. I want to explore kind of the symphony of your problem-solving abilities.
Yeah.
Because I think it could help people in co-founder partnerships.
Yeah.
How are you guys similar and different?
Yeah.
And then first question, second question is is there an example where you faced a really insurmountable problem? And then I'd love to get into kind of the zing and zang of how you solve that.
So I think going back to the theme of this, we're really similar on values. We care about the same thing. We had the same vision for where we wanted to take the business. And that similarity was really important because there was never any debate about sort of the direction to take the business in. How we get there definitely vary depending on our personalities, skills, and experience. And that was where I think we always got to better answers. I suppose the roles that we did. So Richard did people and brand. John did manufacturing and systems, and I did commercial and deals and expansion. So it was sort of those three things sort of defined the way we looked at problems. John was super logical, very sort of process is the wrong word, but just super logical, I suppose, is the easiest way of saying it. Richard, very instinctive, very good at cutting through what's not important and what really matters, both to consumers and to the team. And I was always trying to find a way to make sure that actually commercially it all made sense. We made some money from it, customers made some money from it, and actually it was sustainable, sort of on a financial basis. And so that archetype wasn't always the way we argued, but that broadly sort of was the angles that we came from. And I think that synthesis helped us get to much better answers. It sometimes meant it took longer. People had to wait for an answer, but it meant that actually, I think, on balance, we got more decisions right than we would have done, certainly, in making those individually.
Interesting. Again, Austin Rogers said this the other day. He goes, "I'm the chaos, Ashley's the perfection," and Charlie Carroll, who did Flatiron, is the what did he say? Chaos. He's all chaos, order, perfection. Yeah. And I think your symphony is really interesting as well. Yeah. Is there an example that kind of brings that to life of where you were facing at the time an insurmountable obstacle, and I'm trying to get into the art of how those three things dance together.
I'd have to, let me have a little think and come back to it maybe. I to go to specifics, I need to.
We'll go on to something a bit easier, but I read somewhere that you like racing cars.
Yes.
Do you race cars?
Yeah.
Describe the parallels of racing cars and running building Innocent. I love finding things at the cross section of different. You learn the most there.
Yeah, so I mean, motor racing is sort of there's a sort of balls out bravery that everyone associates with it, but then there's the real detail analysis of data and understanding exactly what you're doing at each point during the corner, which is really which I sort of love the combination of the two things. So because you get a huge amount of.
So you doing the ones that is it like rally racing?
No, it's track racing.
Track racing.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. So track racing. So these days in cars, you've got a huge amount of data. So you've got your videoing everything you do. You've got all your pedal inputs, your G-force, lateral and longitudinal. You've got what the suspension's doing. So your driver coach can absolutely see what you've done going into a corner and can trace versus what you've done versus what they as a pro have done. And so you can be deluding yourself that you're braking late enough or that you're getting on the accelerator nice and early, whereas actually the data says something quite different, because in the sort of the sort of intensity and speed, your brain starts playing tricks on you, and you think you're doing something and you're not, and the data really shows you that. And so I love the sort of combination of the sort of data side and the sort of the balls out bravery bit that you need.
I'd never put, because I just think, right, fuck it, let's just go around the track as fast as you can. And I would never have thought there's data in that. I suppose there's an art of data and ball bust courage in brand building. And I think if you're too much this way, you lack the courage to go, right, let's actually just make a decision and go for it.
Yeah.
But then if you're two gangbusters going around the track without any data, you're going to
hit the thing.
You're going to
hit the ball. Yeah, exactly. So
I
think there is a parallel. I'd never really thought about it myself either, but it's that yin and yang combination that I really like. And then of course there's the camaraderie, the relationship you build with the team and your pro, all that stuff, which is very teamwork. So I've done various different things. I started with Caterham's little open things. Did sort of quite a few years racing those. They're all identical. They're not that fast, so it's not that risky in comparison to some of the bigger stuff. But it's unbelievably close racing, and it's just great fun.
What's the feat like? To describe the feelings. I've only done bloody go-karting.
Yeah.
So it's like, what's
well, I don't think I've ever been as scared as the sitting on the grid for my very first race. So I just got my license. Went in for my first race. It was Brands Hatch in a Caterham, and I'm somewhere 20th on a grid of 24 or something like that, and waiting for the lights to go green. And it's like, my heart must have been doing 150. Like I was just sat there doing nothing but waiting, the anticipation, and then you go, and then it's the melee of the first corner, and it's just great fun. Your brain, you realise actually you start running out of mental capacity to do stuff because you're so focused in the moment. Then you make a mistake, you miss a gear or something like that, and it's there's nothing quite as intense in that in the workplace environment I've found. That kind of absolute mental and physical overload all at the same time.
Yeah, I think you can, and this, I was not planning for this link together, but it is.
Yeah.
But I think you can get that kind, not known as intense, right?
Yeah.
But as that 3-1, you can get a real buzz and intensity on an intense negotiation.
Definitely.
I'd love to know, I think it was on the Jam Jar website, they called you, Mr. Commercial, your title. I'd love to go almost parachute into what's the kind of the most intense negotiation, or one of that felt like you're at Brands Hatch. You've got the green lights, 3, 2, 1, zoom. Because I think everyone has got to negotiate.
Yes.
And that's negotiating getting your kids off swimming class. There's I'd love to know, and I think I'd love to understand the way you approach negotiations. But I'd love to. I think the best way to kind of jump into this is to parachute into what was one of the most intense negotiations where you felt like you're at Brands Hatch.
Let me think. What was it? Actually, it was pretty. I think probably some of the most intense stuff was trying to get our first listing at Tesco. We'd got listings at Waitrose and Sainsbury's. They were really pro the brand. The brand we did really well there, but Tesco was still holdouts, not really believing in the brand or the category actually, because they'd had a slightly bad experience with the previous brand and it hadn't worked that well, and they didn't really believe Innocent was going to change things that much. But they were critical, 30% of the market, they're critical to getting the business to really work. And I remember them being very, very fixed on, okay, if the only way we're going to do this is by you promising to do a half price promotion around launch time, and we'd never done anything like that. We couldn't make money at half price. It was like, no way, that's not the way we do it. It's devaluing the brand, all this sort of thing.
Sorry to interject, just to set the context, how big was the business at this size?
So we were probably about 10 million turnover, so we were decent scale.
Yeah.
But we hadn't gone everywhere, and we were still mostly little bottles rather than the cartons, and the cartons as they were there. And I think it was it was interesting because we were like, no, we're not doing that. We're really principled. We're not going to do the half price. We're not going to do this thing. And Tesco were very like, no, well, you're not getting the listing then, sort of thing. And it was trying to work out whether there was a way through that, or whether we had to take what they were saying and try and turn it into a positive. And I think actually that was the realization that actually they may be right, that really the way to get noticed was to do those half price promotions. But at the same, if we were going to do that, we then needed to make sure that we were building brand at the same time. So actually we needed to be advertising at the same time. And we looked at what other sort of FMCG brands had done. And I think Actimel had done very similar sort of strategies. So we looked at what Danone did, and that was half price promotions with TV. And this is going back 20 years, so it might not be relevant now, but we were like, well, okay, maybe we can go, accept their demands on that if we do the TV and build the brand at the same time. And actually, that strategy then completely worked, and we rolled that out through other people. And by changing our ingoing thought based on what they were demanding, actually, it made it better. We ended up. That was the strategy that really grew the business for the next 3 or 4 years. By getting noticed on price, but also getting the brand story out there, and that was pretty intense because we went from a position where it's like, God, we're not going to get this listing, it's not going to happen, through to actually, yeah, we've got a deal that we're not sure is going to work, and then when it actually started working, it's like, oh God, this strategy is working, it's great. And so it was definitely a journey that we went on.
Oh my God, I am so excited. It feels like Hungary is finally swimming in the big leagues. I can't believe this. It's absolutely mental. But delighted to announce that Big Fish, yes, Big Fish, are partnering with the podcast. Perry's been on the podcast 3 times. Listeners absolutely love it. Some of our most downloaded and cherished episodes of all time. But Big Fish are behind literally so many brands in your cupboard, in your weekly shop. Charlie Bigham, Year Valley, Tyrrell's, Clipper Tea, Goo, Rana. I mean, mate, the list is longer than the River Nile. But they also share risk and invest in brands that they really believe are a force for good. They're brands that they believe are going to be the next big thing, like Howder, the snack that gives back. But even more exciting news, Big Fish want to speak to the next wave of small challenger food and drink brands that are destined for big things. The racconteurs, the movers, shakers, buccaneering visionaries. So look, if you want to speak to Big Fish and just have a chat, get your brand in front of them, then drop me a message. My mate Louis from Local Beer, Amazing Beer, was in their office, aka La Fish Bowl, last week chatting to Perry and the Big Fish crew. So drop me a message if you would like to speak to them. How do you, for people who are going into negotiations with either retailers or investors, what would you say are some of the kind of, with every negotiation you've sat in, like, what are some of the 1 to 3 principles that you think could really help people listening to this?
So I think you need to be very clear about what you're trying to achieve. And in that example previously, we sort of had to change what we were trying to achieve from the new information that came in, that actually that the promotional strategy was the right way to go. But be very clear, because I think it's quite easy to go into things without that clarity. Be very clear what you're prepared to trade away. So there's plenty of courses on how you negotiate, and that was one of the key things that we did at Innocent, was taught everyone negotiation techniques. And I think so. Do your preparation. I think that's key. Be flexible in the moment, because sometimes there's a deal to be done at the time, and rather than going away and kind of analysing it all, actually say yes. That can be hugely useful. Just sort of seize the day. But also, the flip side is like, be prepared to walk away, and say, what, this isn't going to happen, because sometimes things change on the other side and they'll come back to you. So it's that reading reading the room is incredible.
The bit you said there about the flexibility of the being able to actually accept a deal versus, is there an example where you've well, I suppose Tesco is the example. Yeah. But I suppose the other side of that is when you've had to walk away, because. So one of the things I write about in my newsletter is early stage founders get blinded by the listing nights, whereby they're like, oh my god, they don't. The deal may not work. But they're like, I just want the 320 Holland Barrett stores or Tesco stores, and then suddenly they've done a deal. They're not making money when they promote.
Absolutely,
it's just a nightmare. And then suddenly, if you've said yes to that, trying to
unpick it.
It's just a nightmare. Is there? Yeah.
I completely agree. I think it's more businesses get sunk on getting listings with the wrong terms or the wrong people or the wrong distribution than they do because they haven't got the listings.
Yes.
So it is, and because for all those reasons you say, it's exciting. Oh, I've got a startup business. I'm getting a huge listing. I'm going to go to all these stores. It's like you just sort of end up not analysing whether it's really the right thing to do, and you can easily get carried away with yourself and say, yeah, I'll make it work. Because actually you can't make it work. And it's the wrong thing to go to too many stores sometimes.
We'll get on to what you think are the requirements for kind of building an anti-fragile brand in grocery as well. But first, did you guys went into 10 Waitrose stores?
Yeah, 2 Waitrose stores at the very beginning, actually.
This is the other thing is why I don't understand why retailers put brands in way too many stores. It's like I always say it's like analogous to throwing a toddler into a deep end without swimming bands.
Totally.
They need to go in slowly. A challenger brand to Toddler, it needs to learn how to put the armbands on. Give them 10 stores. Why do you think? How did you get 10 stores, or was that because there wasn't really challenger brands then, or?
It was definitely a different retail environment. So I think they're probably tougher these days. But I think it was we did literally direct to store distribution for 2 Waitrose stores because they couldn't really believe whether it was going to. They were they sort of thought this might work, but didn't really believe it would, so weren't prepared to give us the listing. But we were like, well, look, we really believe it will work, so we'll show you, and we'll go to all the hassle of doing direct store distribution for those 2 stores, and it flew. The Richmond store, I think, where we tested was just absolutely, there was a whole end, and it was just stacked, and the manager loved it. He was like, no, honestly, this is flying, and of course that then builds the confidence to get the 50 store listing, and then we had to work hard to make that listing work, and then it was then you roll out to 100 stores, and it was very, very incremental. It was hugely helpful in a way that we had a short shelf life, because it was completely obvious you can't go to too many stores, because if you've got a short shelf life and you're too many stores, you'll waste, right? So it was just a function of it was completely the right strategy, irrespective of whether you've got long shelf life or short shelf life, to go to the right number of stores and support them and then move to the next lot. It's far too easy to try and roll out to 1,000 stores and then not be able to get the rate of sale, the rotation. Our short shelf life meant we didn't really have an option in that strategy. It wasn't us being particularly smart. It was would have been evident madness to go into 1,000 stores. Not that we'd have got that listing at the beginning, but it's so important. What really matters is whether you're selling fast, your rate of sale, and whether you're adding to the category. If you're doing those 2 things, the supermarket's going to be happy, right?
Yeah.
So you just a bit of patience to make sure that each step of the distribution is working really well is key, and that's what we look for in the brands we work with at Jam Jar. It's what we did at Innocent, and I just think it's the way you build a brand. It's only the big multinationals who've already got huge established relationships can go, right, let's bang it out to every store, see what happens, and if it doesn't work, we'll launch something else.
Putting too many brands in too many stores too early is, as I say, it's like throwing a toddler in
it's the death knell of too many brands, or it makes life so much harder than it would otherwise be.
You said something that really kind of set my curiosity going, Adam, in terms of more brands kind of sync, I think was the word you used, with listings that are going
too wide than
the wrong terms.
Yes, the wrong terms. Yeah.
What are the absolute right terms in terms of to build an anti-fragile brand in grocery specifically? What are the 1 to 3 things that?
Well, look, there's one thing. Fundamentally, you've got to be able to make money. There's no point in doing a deal where you look at it, and once you've got all your costs in, including your promotional costs, your support costs, all the logistics bits, you're just not making enough money, and it's. there's no point in doing it, frankly, unless you're very clear that this is a loss leading listing because this will get me all the other things and I can do those deals in a different way. Then a listing that's fundamentally loss making is pointless. And it's too easy to say yes to because things will change, things will be different in the next one. But often people go, well, I want the same terms, I need the same terms, and you end up doing the same thing. And that's, if you've got a good product and you believe in it, you make sure the price you charge is the price that allows you to have a sustainable business. It's both the price to make sure the profit's there, but also in cash terms. These days there's less room for negotiation on cash terms. You end up, doing whatever the supermarkets say. We pushed very hard at the very beginning to get very short terms, and that was hugely helpful in terms of allowing the business to self-fund.
I want to talk about France and Germany because, again, Giles talked about you in great glowing terms, but he said that there was a lot of pressure to get that right, and you were incredibly stoic in terms of like saying this is the way the brand's gonna go. Yeah. Could you just kind of add some colour to that period in the business and how what the pressures were and how you remained stoic and then how you got it going, I suppose. Yeah.
So we decided we did a big bit of strategy work and say, how do we expand Innocent? Do we do categories, so more categories in the UK, or do we do international? And if we do international, do we do Europe or US? And we decided to do European smoothie expansion. So that was sort of, that was at least we had clarity.
Why not US, just out of curiosity?
Actually, we got very close to doing it, but in the end, it was we would need to set up manufacturing in the US as well, and it was. Therefore, you'd have to launch at a reasonable scale, and at the time, the business just didn't have the scale to justify doing that. We would have bet the business essentially on the US. It would have been if it works, we're home dry. If it doesn't, we're dead. And so it was too big a risk, basically. And funny enough, the business still hasn't gone to the US. Innocent doesn't sell in the US. So I think it was the right strategy. So we were decided on a European strategy, and it was hard, and we spent a lot of money on it, and it nearly failed many times. And we nearly pulled the plug on it, more to the point, many times because it sort of under-delivered for many years. But fundamentally,
Why was it so hard, and why did it under-deliver first?
So I think France is. So let's take the example of France. It's a tough retail market. The way the trade works is different to the UK. I went in hoping, first of all, we went in with a really light touch, just hoping an energetic guy on the ground would be able to sort of build a great business. Now, remember, we're in a short life product that you've got no stores, you can't store it, you've got to get distribution really quickly. And it was just too big a job for one person to be able to do, and it just didn't work. It didn't have the support. You sort of can easily get carried away. Oh, everyone knows our brand in the UK. It'll be like that in France, where of course no one knows your brand in France. So you've got to start absolutely from the very beginning again. And it's so easy to just assume a bit of success in the UK translates automatically into success internationally. It doesn't. You're starting all the way from scratch, and you've got to do all that hard work that you did at the very beginning of the business all over again. And so I think we got slightly carried away that we were doing well in the UK and that would work, but it just doesn't. So then we said, right, if we're going to do this properly, we're going to have to actually hire a team and do all those things that we did in the UK, get the press, the PR, just the sampling going, make sure the ads translate in a really good way, make sure we build the relations with the trade, all that stuff that you have to do to grow a brand. And that takes money because you've got a tiny business there and you've got a team that is losing money as a result. We then, I think, made mistakes of not getting people who were senior enough in sort of or knew the retail trade well enough. And I slightly wanted to do deals in the same way that we did them in the UK. And every country has its own way of doing sort of retail trade deals, and trying to force fit a UK way into a French just was wrong, right? It was just plainly wrong.
How are they different? Just trying to understand.
Just the shape of deal. France, you end up negotiating, for instance, terms on an annual basis, and you sort of have literally, there's by law, I think it's had to close, was it the end of February or something, or the end of January, and you had to have your terms written by then, and if you didn't, then you couldn't get the listing for the next. It was like, that can't be right, and I was sort of railing against it and pushing back, but of course that's the way it works in France, and like me saying I don't want to do it like that is kind of irrelevant, and it's like just fit in with the way it happens there, and so doing it in the French way, if you're talking to French supermarkets, is the only way to do it. And same Germany, doing it the German way. So you kind of have to learn that that's the way it is. Consumer-wise, actually consumers were much more similar. So the consumer-wise, actually, Innocent stood for being natural, being good for you, being sustainable. That mix of things was exactly the same in France or Germany or the UK. And you made sure it was local language, etc. But actually, the changes there weren't big. It was the trade that was different.
And how did you? We'll wrap this up because I know you've got to go in a sec.
Yeah.
But it's just there's so many questions I've got to ask about this one period. What was what were the pressures basically saying this? Is this going to work?
Yeah, we were losing money every year. We never quite sold as much as we said we'd do. We lost more than we said we could do. It's like, is this? Are we just pouring? We had a nice profitable UK business. It was like, why are we continuing?
How did you know it was going to work? Like, I'm trying to get into your head, Adam.
So I think for me the signs were the rates of sale where we were in store, when we were properly merchandised, we looked good. Actually, we're really good, and so it's like, if we can execute this well, it will work. And that was the belief, that was the sort of data point that gave me the belief that it would stay. And we were messing it up. We weren't executing it right for a myriad of reasons. Some of them mine because I wanted to do deals in the wrong way. Others, we didn't have quite the right team. Other times we just didn't invest enough money. There were lots of different reasons for the different countries. But actually, it was definitely, the belief was, the data is showing that actually we can get this right. It really works. So let's focus on our execution.
And then how did you get it right? Like, what did you?
So it was getting the right people in who had the trade expertise. It was actually investing enough money because in an export market, you suffer from it not being your home market where people, you've got the network. It kind of, all that home stuff makes it cheaper basically to get a business going. And we were sort of trying to do the same thing in France, whereas it wasn't our home market. We had no leg up basically to get going. So actually it's just a bit more expensive. So once you started putting the right team, started putting the right money behind it in the right shape, with the right deals, things started to come. And it was like, okay, this is the way it will work. And actually Germany started working for us, even though we started France first. Germany started working for us more quickly than France did. France still took, it was 10 years before France, actually was sure it was going to work.
Are you looking to turbocharge your brand, to take it to another level, save money, save energy, save stress, save time? Well, I've got the perfect thing for you. I am delighted to announce that HC Brands, formerly HC Consulting, my boy Harry Clark, has just launched a commercial growth accelerator program designed specifically for challenger food and drink brands. You can upskill your commercial team. They've got so many modules. You can handpick them where you can do the full shebang. You're going to save hours of research. You're going to get the tools to turbocharge your growth, get better clarity on your brand's objectives and directions. And look, Harry's worked with some amazing brands, Holy Moly, Islands, Savile, and Rooted Drinks. He's really helped me with a strategy for Hungary. Yeah, if you're looking to turbocharge your brand, link in the show notes, and you're going to be able to do that easy peasy, lemon squeezy.
And what were you saying to like the board or of the other people in the room where the pressure is to say, because I think this is there'll be, and I've seen this happen where there's pressures from the board and then there's the founders like laser focus, like this is where the brand, almost like the racing car driver, like, this is the way we're going, versus the wins of the investors. Yeah. Tons of people listening to this right now will be going through that. Yeah. Any advice on how to kind of detail and show like that delicate dance with those wins?
I suppose I was always really clear on the reasons I believed it would work, the reasons for the shortfalls that we were experiencing, and I wasn't like, we've got to do this. It was like, look, I think I honestly believe I think this is the right thing, but we together have got to make the decision. So it wasn't a sort of, me against everyone. It was me trying to be clear, the person closest to it, why I believed this was the right answer, and then the board would make the decision. It wasn't my call as to whether we were going to stick in Germany or pull out. It was like, together we had to go on the journey, and I think that was, and that was kind of the way we made decisions. And it was like, let's bring everyone along and give people the reasons to continue to back it.
Together we had to go on the journey.
Yeah.
Final question. Interviewed a guy last week, really interesting guy. He's an author written a book called The Science of Storytelling and The Status Game. He's just been on. He's really cool. Will Storr.
Okay.
Really interesting guy.
Yeah.
But he actually does. We talked about the role of status in storytelling in cultures. What he got right. What you guys did so I think well is that everyone talks about Innocent. Emma's talked about Innocent, Giles, the Barney. There's whole, like literally like a university of Innocent Illuminate. What Will said to me was something quite profound about how the storytelling of the brand and the employee finds their status in it, and that's how they kind of define some sort of meaning. Yeah. And he said basically the way to define culture is finding the me in we. And I was like, wow, like that's like we are Innocent and me, and obviously like now like Giles is like I was at Innocent, Emma, I was at Innocent. I define myself at that. How did you create the me in we at Innocent?
Well, we certainly didn't think about it in those terms. I suppose, it was quite simplistic thinking. It was like, look, we're clear where we want to go. We want to build Europe's favourite little juice company, and we want to do it in a way that feels natural to us. So we want to go into work and enjoy our time at work. We want to be ourselves. We don't want to pretend to be anybody else because we're in the office. We just want to be our natural selves. And it helped that we were three mates who were running the business because, we had a way of talk, an informality in the way we talked, trust between each other that I think just set the tone for the business. And it was fortunate that those things were really positive, and it was fortunate that the three of us thought in different ways, as we've touched on before, that helped business make good decisions. But I suppose by being our natural selves was the thing that made it work. There was no politics, there was no artifice. People could come to work, be themselves, and not get judged on anything other than whether they did a good job in what they were doing, and whether they lived up to the values. And so it was. Yeah, it sort of started to get a momentum of its own once we'd established that foundation, and every good person we hired then added to it and took things on themselves. And so, quite soon it wasn't the three of us directing stuff. It was an organism. It was a culture that was kind of self-propagating, and people were adding to it and finding their own meaning in it, and finding their own place in it in a way that we didn't have to sort of do anything in a way. It was self-sustaining. You
said like that, and again on a podcast, that you had all these people think, and rightly so, like you were the originals in terms of this culture, coding the values, and kind of the first, in my opinion, real challenger brand. But you said, I think on an interview you did, that you actually kind of pulled different ideas, and I believe nothing's truly original. I think you're the quote we were talking about is David Bowie, which is the only art I'll ever study is the art I can steal of. Which I think is brilliant because and he's one of the most original. I think he's the most original, maybe before the Beatles. What were some of the ideas you stole to help to pull together, almost like a bloody smoothie, like blitz it together? So you got the banana, which is this, the apple that's that. You blitz it together and like, right, this is Innocent. And that's how people found the me and we.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was there was all sorts of things, from trying to get. From the very beginning, trying to get the packaging to look as natural as possible, and I think we just stole the idea of having, sort of natural ribbed paper from wine bottles, because actually that was what, what looked best like that, rather than most FMCG products were sort of very shiny plasticized paper, and that was not what we wanted. Our vans were, definite inspiration from Dumb and Dumber. And they were brilliant. They were like the most effective sales vehicles you could have, because people were completely disarmed by you turning up in a grassy van or a cow. No one's on their guard when this turns up. So it was brilliant. And but once again, that wasn't all our own idea. That came from other people. I think one that I don't know where the source of it was, because it was a guy, New Adam, who was our marketing guy, early doors, came up with the hats on the bottles. And I don't know whether that was inspired by something else or whether he genuinely came out with that idea. But that was one of the best things Innocent ever did, marketing terms, and still continues, I think.
Why was that so good?
It just, I think there's just something ridiculously cute looking about bottles with little woolly hats on, and then the way it was constructed by consumers knitting them, so it wasn't sort of factory made, and then the whole thing was charity. Just the combination of those three bits just made it just captured people's imaginations, and it was funny. We did it for 3 years, and we were like trying to think of the next big idea, and it was like, well, we should just make this bigger because it's brilliant. And when we realised that and said, right, let's make this our main sort of marketing push for the next few years, and we did, and it was just, people loved it.
And just for listeners, the hats, was that like? It was during a period of time you'd put a hat on the.
So we got consumers to knit hats for us. They all came into the office. They got put on bottles, and every bottle that was sold with a hat on, we gave 50p to help the aged. I think that was broadly the construct. And so they sold much faster. So we in the supermarkets were happy. The charities got a load of money, and people got these cute little bottles with hats on that, I don't know, that you found them on beer taps in pubs. You found people had them arranged on their computers in the office. It was just like a little bit of not taking yourself too seriously, and just a little bit of creativity coming through in little moments of joy in people's day. I think that's what it created, and as such, I think people loved it.
Let's wrap this up. Final question I ask all guests is what's one truth you believe that most people would disagree with you on?
One truth. Most people. What do people say on that? That's a big existential question.
Yeah, sorry. I should
throw that in right at the end.
So I'm trying to think what people have said. So I mean, one of them is actually a chef called Callum Franklin. He did. Did you? I don't know if you went to the Holborn dining room.
No, I didn't.
Oh, because he used to do these amazing pies. He actually said his truth was like nothing is original.
Right.
So that was his. I'm trying to think what Giles said. Giles said. He said something quite commercial, which was, he was talking about like the hollow revenue and forecasting.
Right.
I.e. basically, like if you get your rate of sale at 10 stores, when you extend it to 100 stores, it's going to drop.
It is going to drop.
Whereas what people think is like it's like they draw a straight line. So that was his.
Yeah, that's quite a good one.
But then, I mean, I interviewed a guy from Warehouse Project, which is like a rave up in Manchester. He bought himself some time. He basically said Jose Mourinho should never have been sacked from Manchester United. But then his actual deeper one was his thing was actually, I don't know if I necessarily agree with him. He's slightly he's been doing this for like 30 years. He was like never slow down. So people are like, they sell. He built Warehouse Project into a huge rave. He had nights in Ibiza and Tokyo, and he was saying, most people get to my age and say, like, right, slow down. He's like, no. That was his.
Okay. I mean, maybe something around a lot of the marketing is nonsense. Focus your marketing efforts on making a better product. That's probably the thing I'd say. It's served us well. People think about Innocent as the pictures, the jokes, the packaging, all that stuff. But in the end, actually, that was secondary to having a great product that was delicious sustainably made, and consistently brilliant. And that's the hidden bit that we spent all our time on, that I think was absolutely instrumental to the success of the business.
That's what I was saying to Libby, is people can get so obsessed with trends, and the only thing that will stand the test of any trend is, does this taste fucking delicious?
If you're making food, make it taste great. Everything else doesn't really matter in the end. Make it taste great, and people continue buying. We did a good job of making it healthy and sustainable, all those other things, but making it absolutely delicious. And so that was the heart of the marketing, and I think lots of people don't realise that about Innocent.
Adam, I know you've got to run. Thank you so much. Incredibly grateful, and our listeners are going to love this. Yeah, thank you so much.
Pleasure. Nice one.